Welcome back to the Hyperspace Podcast. My name is Sam, and as always, I'm joined by my lovely co-host. It's Michael Ghost. Michael, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. And today we're here for episode 6 of the Bad Batch. We're gonna have a breakdown of the episode titled "Decommissioned," and yeah, it was a good episode. What were your general thoughts of it, Michael? Get us straight in there.
Well, I think we can say that we're going towards places, and there is clearly a more defined goal in what the Bad Batch will be doing. It's going a bit away from the aimless wandering they were doing, as there's a bit more of the story that some of the plot points have been continued in this episode.
Yeah, 100%. No, I thought it was a very good episode. I enjoyed a lot of the things in it, as we'll get on to soon. But we start back on Ord Mantell, where last episode finished. Omega is learning how to use her bow, which is her weapon. It's good that she finally actually does have a weapon, because otherwise she was just kind of there, just kind of relying on the others to kind of protect her, which was a bit unideal, because every time she got in a situation, she was just like always having to call for Hunter, because she's like, I can't really shoot anything and I can't really do anything. And they had Sid is back, one of our favorite characters, or definitely I love Sid.
Mm.
She's amazing at bringing her normal. This is my briefing goggles to Tech. Tech just gets bullied by Sid, doesn't
Yeah,
he?
I think all of them get bullied by Sid, but yeah, Tech really has it rough, and doesn't he?
I really do feel sorry for him. But even when Hunter was like, "Okay, we'll do it," and she's like, "Yeah, I know you'll do it. I just told you you'll do it." And it's just she will just is such a savage, and she's just great. But by the end of the episode, or not in this episode, next episode, I don't think she'll be happy. Then we'll come on to that a bit later. But yeah, she sends them on a mission to Corellia to get a tactical droid. And this raised a lot of questions. This is the first thing that you really have a discussion over. And because in the last episode, episode 5 with the Rancor, you got to see who wanted um, Moochie, and because you saw that Jabba's servant came at the end of the episode to
Yeah,
get
Bib
the
Fortuna came, didn't he?
yeah,
Nice little cameo.
yeah, Bib Fortuna, a great cameo. But in here we don't see who it is, as it ends on a bit of a cliffhanger. But who do you think wanted the droid, and why? This raised like a lot of questions, and is one of the many things the Star Wars community are debating over, because after this episode.
I think there's a few interesting people it could be. Maybe it's the Kaminoans, because they're trying to develop this new, like, I guess, line of clones, and that's why they're trying to get. They need at least an original clone, right? And they're talking about the deterioration of Jango Fett's DNA. So maybe it's them, and they're trying to like learn from the tactical droids what their like weaknesses are. Obviously, there's a few other people it could be. Maybe the Hutts as well, because they hate the. I think they also equally don't like dealing with the Empire. Maybe some of the crime syndicates as well. But it could also be like, could have well been Bail Organa or something. But if he'd hired one lot of people to do it, I don't think he would have hired another lot. If it was him, which we'll talk about later, if it was him. But I don't know. I think there's a few people it could be. Like I said, it could be someone from the early bits of the rebellion, even a Mon Mothma or something. But I don't know, likely someone really see like the crime syndicate. Maybe like Crimson Dawn will be in this show.
Yeah, no, that could be a really cool cameo. I agree with you. I think it's most likely the Kalmanoans, because, as you said, they're breeding their Phase 3 clones, and they it would make sense that they want the information from the tactical droid about how clones fight, so they can use that information to develop a clone that combats those ways and to be a stronger clone. But I do also it did go through my head that maybe the Martes twins, who we'll talk about, they're back later. But yeah, maybe the Martes twins and the Bad Batch were both possibly assigned by like the rebels. But yeah, I agree that it maybe the Empire would, but I can't see the rebels getting two different people to do the same mission, because that causes complications, as we saw in this episode.
Mm.
It like either one of them, it could have been smooth sailing, but of course something had to go wrong. And yeah, no, I agree that it is probably the Kalmanons, and that's the most likely explanation. And carrying on in the episode, yeah, we're in the factory. I thought it was so sick just seeing surrounded by all these battle droids we've been so used to in the Clone Wars series, and they're just getting melted down and just being destroyed. And you're like, wow, they were so like cheap and like dispensable by the Empire. They're just straight away, they're just getting melted down, because I think they could have been like useful assets to keep around. I mean, admittedly you now have the clone army, but then having them combined with like some of the droids, I mean, you don't necessarily have to make any more, but to melt them down, you could have just kept the droids around until they were extinct and then go full clone. Like, surely that's something they could have considered.
I think especially with what they were complaining about, which was that clones were too expensive. And I think we talked about it last episode. The reason why I can see like moving to stormtroopers as being good is because they need more soldiers, not a really good fighting force. But then if we're going to go with that line of argument, it makes more sense to be going and making battle droids and like keeping them, because they'd probably be, if you're only keeping like like a planet in order, you wouldn't need that. You'd need less. You'd probably need to have mixture of both, but you wouldn't need that many clone troopers on a planet. You just need like a ton of battle droids, or at least you could get them because they're there. And it probably, like you said, it wouldn't cost that much. It seems so strange to see the Empire just melting them down like they're absolutely nothing.
Yeah, I just don't really see the point in it, and they could be a useful asset. But the Empire can do what the Empire want to do. But the next thing that happens is we're introduced to the Martyrs twins. We haven't seen them since the last series of the Clone Wars, in probably most fans will describe as the most unforgettable arc in that series, but important for Ahsoka's story. I
Mm.
think it's fair to say. And what's your opinion on these twins? Because I think the Star Wars community are not massive fans of these two sisters.
Yeah, honestly, I don't really care, to be honest. It's not that I hate them or anything. I just don't really care about them, because they did what they needed to do in season 7. So I'm not sure they needed to be in this episode, but then they also in this episode served the role they were meant to play, which is just a bit of competition for the Bad Batch and a little bit of moral questioning for them. But yeah, otherwise, I'm glad. By the looks of it, they're not going to be coming back, and honestly, that's fine with me.
Yeah, that's that's fair enough. I think, to be honest, I think Trace is all right, and I think she comes across well in the Ahsoka arc in Clone Wars as well. It's just Rafa, even though they're both, as we found out later, working for someone good, Rafa still comes along as quite annoying, and she's just really almost hard to like, especially in this episode.
Mm.
And it's just hard to really get along with these twins. But Trace is great, and she has a moment later which we'll talk about, which kind of redeems her a bit, even though she didn't really need redeeming. But another big plot point in this episode, after the Martes twins and Bad Batch get into a fight with the security droids, Wrecker has to go pull a lever, and this means he has to conquer his fear of heights. And
Mm.
while he swings onto onto the platform. Of course, he hits his head against it like he has in every episode about 100 times. I talked about it in episode 2 that it's definitely his chip. I knew it all along. And in this episode, we finally get confirmation as he hits his head and he saying, "Good soldiers follow orders," that famous mantra with clones about to turn on their Jedi counterparts. And the question is, though, has the chip fully activated, or has it slightly activated and gone slightly dormant again? Because he is saying that, and then he kind of goes unconscious, and then he wakes up and he's a bit more fine. He does hear Crosshair's voice in his head, but he kind of goes back to his normal self. What do you think? Do you think his chip has fully activated, or is it slightly activated?
I don't think it's fully activated yet, but I think it's gonna. He hits his head one more time. We know what's gonna happen. He's gonna like. He'll probably try and do what Wolf did, and like in the Rebels, where he informed on the Jedi being there, and that was like because I don't think he had his chip removed early enough, and that's what happened to him. He still had some of that programming in there, so maybe it'll be a similar situation where he like dobs them into the Empire and says, "Oh, we're here," or whatever. Or there'll be some situation where it's going to really bite them when he finds out. I think we were speculating last time that we'll probably see Rex, or I guess another clone who's known about the chip, who's going to tell them how to remove it, maybe from Wrecker. But yeah, I think it's probably dormant for now, but it's not going to be dormant for very long.
Yeah, it was. It's a shame because I do like Wrecker. I think he's a likable character, and seeing him like this isn't nice. I think the whole Star Wars community was just there like, "Oh, please be okay," and then he mutters those words, and straight away everyone is not happy. But meanwhile, while this is all going on, Omega gets herself in trouble. I mean, unsurprisingly, she gets herself trapped on a conveyor belt going into a massive, I don't really know, incinerator, I just call it, where they get plopped and then get melted down. I don't know why, but when I was watching this scene, I just immediately just went back to Toy Story 3.
So did I.
It was the
for some reason.
thing. It was the weirdest thing. I was just watching this scene, and I'm all of a sudden like being brought back to me in the cinema watching Toy Story 3, and I was like, "What is happening?" I was like,
I think especially when she falls into the pit, right?
yeah.
And like the thing, the all of the stuff starts falling into the incinerators. Yeah.
It was that was so weird. I just didn't think I'd be watching something Star Wars and then all of a sudden be brought back to the Toy Story franchise. I thought that was quite weird. But yeah, Amiga is trapped, and Hunter, of course. It's funny because Hunter was kind of trapped with Rafa. They were kind of under heavy fire. They couldn't really move position, but then he hears Omega's in trouble, and he just runs out in front of all these droids. He just doesn't care anymore. He just puts his life on the line. He pulls a structure down, which almost kills Rafa, which I'm sure some people in the Star Wars community wish happened, and destroyed a lot of the droids, and just went to save Omega. Trace, to be fair to her, because she actually has a moral compass, unlike Rafa. I'm just slating Rafa now. I sound like one of the rest of the Star Wars community. But she actually does her bit to save her. Admittedly, Omega would have probably died without Hunter. But let's be real. How many times has this happened in this series? Is it every episode just going to be Omega gets in trouble, Hunter has to rescue it? Not any of the other Bad Batch. It's just Hunter rescues her.
Yeah. I feel like with the Bad Batch, a lot of the characters are very much separate, like or separated into little groups. Because there's Wrecker who sort of goes in between them, but then there's then there's Hunter and Omega, who are definitely very separate. And then there's just Tech and Echo, who are constantly either bantering each other or just complaining about some tech stuff, right?
Yeah, no, it was a moment in this episode where Echo like shut down and like Tech gave him the look like you've shut it down, and he was like, "Yeah, I know." He was kind of like give that thing like, "Yeah, I had to do that," but Tech was just looking at him like, Why have you done that?" They're such a. It's weird. I was talking to my friend Jamie about the Bad Batch, and he was talking about Echo, and he doesn't think that Echo. He thinks he's a bit of a pointless character because
Uh,
anything he can do, Tech can do.
I think in some ways maybe that way, but I was gonna say like when we saw maybe he's not able to contribute to the team differently, functionally, but we saw like earlier when we were talking about the her learning how to use the bow, he's the one who's like enforcing her like practicing and stuff. Whereas all the other Bad Batch don't really have this, and he has this sort of mindset from being a regular trooper who had to do all this training and stuff. And he realizes that you do just have to practice to get good, whereas the other one, all the others have sort of abilities or like engineered to be that way. So I think he contributes differently, but yeah, I can see the argument. Like sometimes I do wonder like what's the point in him being able to like access like tech, like all of the little computer stuff if Tech does that anyways.
Yeah, I can certainly see his point of view. He had a great bit in this as well. He's also kind of comedic, comic relief, as
Yeah.
there's a lot of moments in each episode, like um in the what episode? I think it was episode 4 when he was like, "You got me for a bargain." I think that was
Yeah. Yeah.
that was such a great line, and there was a line in here as well
Oh yeah.
where Rafa repeats exactly what Trace says, and Trace is like, "Is there an Echo in here?" And he goes up to her and goes, "Yep, I'm Echo," and he's like so
Yeah.
confused. He thought she was actually calling him over, and
Yeah.
she was like, okay, here's the plan." And I thought that was such a
Yeah.
funny moment. I really like that. I love Echo.
It's Yeah, I know. I That's the thing. I think also us as like Clone Wars fans have this attachment to him, and like it's nice seeing him like in the show because we've seen his entire life story basically from like that was it the Shinies episode and what was that season 1 I
Mm,
think of the Clone Wars,
yeah.
like right to like when he was fighting in like he was protecting Camino, and like also beyond like in season 7 where he's like he joins the Bad Batch. So we've seen like his entire like story, at least from the in the entirety of the Clone Wars for him.
Yeah, we
So I
certainly have.
think I think he's like somewhat a vehicle for us, like I guess we call it like the diehard fans, or at least the Clone Wars fans who've been here the entire time. And yeah, I think he's a vehicle for a lot of that. And he also provides a point of view of like someone who isn't just a reg.
Yeah,
Like he doesn't quite fit that mold, but he is.
yeah, he is a he was a Reagan. I still think he is, despite him being modified and he's a bit cyborgy now. He's still like the same Reg. I mean, as you said, we all are so attached to him from Rook. I think it was Rookies, the early
Rookies, yeah.
episode, to the Citadel, where
Mm,
we all, I know, breathe a collective like, "Oh no, Echo's dead." No one
mm.
thought he was alive. There was
Especially
speculation and there was comics, but no one thought he was alive.
especially after like all of Domino Squad just like fall, like all of them do. Like
Literally.
and they all had very like all of them had really good stories. Like especially we talk about fives as well. Like him finding Order 66. It's kind of like me. It's quite a nice circle, I guess. The way
Yeah,
that like that they tie in together now, or tying that the elements of like Order 66 are now like being seen from Echo's point of view, I guess as well.
yeah, it's quite a tragic story. The story of
Mm,
Domino Squad, isn't it? Just seeing, but they all had, as far as I can remember, they all had very heroic deaths, and they were all um, to they were all to save someone, or Yeah, they were certainly heroic deaths, and I hope in this series we don't see Echo die because he is the last remnant of Domino's squad, and I don't think I could really see him because I really like Echo. He's
Mm.
I don't know if he's my favorite member of Bad Batch, but he's certainly up there just because we've known him for so long and we've just fallen in love with this character.
I think also he's got this very like he's got this very like tired veteran point of view. He's kind of and like sometimes you just see him and he's just so like it's like he said like you got me for a bargain. Like I laugh because of the delivery on that line. He's just so done with it. Like he's so done with the whole situation sometimes. And I think also like sometimes the Bad Batch need like his point of view because otherwise they don't know how to do things in like the I guess the reg manner, which is not always the best way not to do it.
Yeah, certainly. No, I agree. Moving back to the story, something that was quite cool is they programmed the tactical droid, and all the battle droids are fighting with the Bad Batch. And they made a comment on it like it's really weird seeing the. It wasn't. This is a direct quote, but they were like, "It's weird having the clankers shooting like on our side," and
Oh,
it
that
was
was Echo,
really
wasn't it, as well? That
yeah
was another
that
Echo line. Yeah.
that was another Echo line. But yeah, it was so cool because I've another all any callback to Clone Wars. Oh, I love it. But it was cool seeing the battle droids fight with them. It took me back to the Mandalorian where they were trying to access the building. They were being attacked by the pirates, and then all of a sudden, two TIE fighters come out and they're shooting because they're in these stormtrooper outfits, and they think that they're Imperial. The stormtroopers save them, and they're like, it's weird seeing the stormtroopers like be on their side. It was a very similar moment to that, wasn't it?
Yeah, yeah, it was because you know I guess the thing is the difference is it's weirder when it's the stormtroopers because it is the battle droids. We've kind of seen this before. We saw it in oh,
The
trying to think
Citadel,
what the episode. I was also thinking in Rebels
yeah, when they went to the
when
base.
like
Mm.
Rex finishes the Clone Wars with was it the super tactical droid, right? The Chad tactical droid,
Yeah.
as I think has been known in the Star Wars fandom, right? And it's really nice, I guess, seeing this as well because another episode where we see like the head of a tactical droid being like a plot point. Like it happened, I think it happened in Rebels when I think Ahsoka hands Kanan and Ezra a tactical droid head to find Rex
Mm.
and gives the CT number of Rex because and there's a few other. I'm sure there's a few episodes of the Clone Wars where like the tactical droid, like they were having to go and get the tactical droid head. I think there's one with Jar Jar in it as well, where like he like breaks it or something, or maybe it's just a normal battle droid head. Actually, I can't remember, but I remember there was one with Jar Jar and battle
Mm.
droid head, and it's I guess it's like nice. I guess Clone Wars fans see all these little callbacks to like Clone Wars or Rebels, where they've they're not necessarily just callbacks, but they're things we recognize and we understand.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's always good to get those callbacks. While they're fighting, we see Omega do bits with her bow. I mean, she finally has learned how to use it. It was a bit weird at the start of the episode. She was very shaky, and
Mm.
then when one on one with Rafa, she was very shaky. And then she dropped her bow, didn't use her bow again. And then the next time she picks up her bow, she's hitting every shot. And people talk about Ray not having any training. I mean, that was a very quick. I mean, she did have training, but admittedly, it was pretty bad to all of a sudden pretty good with the bow.
Yeah, it was a little bit weird. Although I guess the thing is maybe like I guess then she dropped it, but I don't know. It's I guess it's not. I guess the thing is she has to actually be able to do something because otherwise we're just gonna. I think she'll become an annoying character, which might be why they've done it like that. But yeah, I see what you mean. She does just suddenly. I was thinking this. It wasn't so much that she suddenly was like doing bits. It's the fact she was like suddenly just rapid firing the bow as well. I like She was like pretty rapidly flying, and not as fast as Sid. Sid's like it
Oh
was
yeah,
insane, but like the whole thing was like she just laughs about her noodle arms, right? Like Sid just says weak little noodly arms or something, right? And then yeah, it's just one of those things where it just seems a bit weird that was the issue, because I don't think she was strong enough to pull the bow all the way back, right? Or she was like shaking when she was doing it, and then suddenly she's able to do bits with it. I don't know if she wasn't pulling it back as far, which might be what it was.
maybe.
That might be why, because I was thinking maybe that's why, but yeah, it's a little bit weird. But I guess the thing is also we did see it at episode 1 where she does just pick up that blast rifle and instinctively knows how to shoot.
That's true.
And there's like, I imagine that there's like some degree where people have been talking about, is that what her purpose was, like is there some sort of level of intuition with stuff, but or the force sensitivity that people have been talking about,
Yeah, that
which
definitely is
yeah,
interesting. It could come into play, but we didn't get any indication of it in this episode anyway.
no,
Um,
the only thing we could talk about was the fact that she could suddenly fire the bow, and that's
yeah,
not enough.
yeah, that's not an indication of force sensitivity. So after they have this fight and they escape, the sisters get the info after Hunter decides that it's better off with them, and Rafa ushers the line. In the end, we all choose sides. I think that's a bit of foreshadowing with them having to make a decision soon. Are they going to fight with the rebels, or are they going to end up with the Empire? I mean, most likely they will end up with the rebels, or certainly assisting them. Maybe not necessarily as a main member of the rebels, but maybe on the periphery. And
I think
what
that
do you?
would be interesting. I think there's some issue. There's a few issues we should talk about, which is like they're having to. I think they're trying to step carefully because they're already potentially retconning things already, and they probably don't want to retcon like Rebels.
Hmm,
And if Rex knew about the Bad Batch, like, and they were on the side of the Rebels, he probably would have called them in to like fight for Lothal, which is, I guess you can argue whether they would or wouldn't, but like it would make sense if he had. So I wonder if I wonder how they're going to deal with that, and I wonder if the Bad Batch is this. It's supposed to be multi-seasonal, right? We've talked about this before. So there's a lot of like, how long are they going to run this for? Because if they're running it for longer, it makes sense they were going to be fighting for the rebels
hmm.
um, at some point. And if it is that long, I wonder if they'll be part of the Rebels sequel show, which we don't know what it is or like how it is or what they'll do with it. And we speculated about it before. We don't know what form it will take, but there will be some continuation of Rebels in some form. And I wonder if they'll fit into that
Yeah,
as well, because I'd imagine Rex would go into that as well, and Wolf as well would potentially.
yeah. No, there's, as you said, it is tricky ground because you then go into Rebels, as you said, around this period, and you'd be like, why didn't they? Why weren't they mentioned? Why didn't they get involved? There's comics around this point, they weren't in them. And there's also going to be the new show with one of the people from Rogue One. I've forgotten his name. Andor,
Andor.
that's it, which is based around the time of the rebellion. So again, you're asking the question, will he will they be featured then? And I don't think they will be. So it's really tough having a lot of shows around this point and how they have to put them together to make sure it all makes sense,
Sense, yeah.
and that they don't have to retcon anything else, any
I
more of
think
the Ahsoka comic.
uh, it's yeah. At least so far, the Bad Batch hasn't had any. I don't think has retconned anything that I'm aware of, but it's certainly getting close, and that's fine. If there's a few things, we'll probably talk about it at the end about them retconning that, but yeah, they've got to really be careful with how they treat the Bad Batch. I think because the Bad Batch is so like separate from, like even regular, in the Clone Wars they were separate from, I guess, the regular troopers, right, the regs. I think even if they were assisting in the rebellion, it wouldn't be in an official capacity. It might be on like a job by job basis, maybe. I think we'll have to see what happens with it, but I think that's maybe the way they have to do it, is like, you know how like Rebels didn't interfere with the original trilogy, because after they free Lothal, they don't really fight, they don't really help that much in the rebellion, or at least when they do, it's like they do the thing at the end where like, oh, Hera was at the Battle of Endor, and because we saw I think the ghost is in the scene, and also the ghost is in Rise of Skywalker about 6-7 times in the same shots.
Yeah, and in Rogue One as well, which is around that
Yeah,
period. So
which is weird, because again, though, it's never mentioned or never dealt with the fact that that they were there. But there you go. Maybe that's how they'll have to deal with it, is when they're doing this future material, they'll just have to include like the ship or like small cameos to like try and weave them in. But I think again, it's they're a slightly different situation than Rebels, even, where Rebels, they were like separate, but they weren't that separate from the normal rebellion. They were only separate because of the way they had like these separate cells. But I think the Bad Batch would be further separated, so maybe that's how they're gonna have to deal with it. But yeah, they've got to really tread carefully, because it would, I think there's like, if you retcon too much stuff, people get annoyed with it, because Disney already got rid of like most like the expanded universe stuff, which is fine. I don't really care about. I think some of the stuff is really good and doesn't really make sense why they did it, but I guess it makes sense to get rid of all of it instead of just selected pieces of it. But it's it'd be annoying if they, continually take stuff away from the fans that they gave in the first place. Or if there's certain, especially if there's lots of plot holes. Like the one I said about the Bad Batch not showing up in Rebels is fine, but or like being involved in Rebels if that was the case. But certainly they need to find some way of explaining it a bit, or some reason why we'd say, oh, well, it makes sense that Rex didn't contact them or whatever.
yeah, I mean, the way that Rebels is dealt with in movies, for example, in Rise of Skywalker and in Rogue One, I think having the ship there is an easy way to do it, because you can just be like, oh, it's their ship, they're on it, and they're not like, seeing a character is different to seeing the ship, and seeing the ship isn't easier, just being like, oh yeah, they were there, there's their ships, a lot easier than them, for example, standing in the background of a shot, and because you'd be like, why are you not going to them? They're interesting. We want to see what the Bad Batch are up to. So it'd be interesting to see how they manage it. I don't know if possibly the reason they're not in it, they might have to kill them off. I think that is a potential way they might have to do it, because otherwise it's very tricky having a lot of shows around this, because otherwise they would know about each other and they'd be mentioned in another show.
Yeah, I think that's, like you said, that's the difficulty, is you've got to really you've got to kind of, they've got to be like, you don't really want them to just show up in cameos, like, oh, here they are in the background of this one shot, so they show up. Like I think I do think that about like Rebels, where they didn't really deal with the original trilogy. They just had this time skip, which was fine for Rebels, but they didn't really like show that much of what any of them were doing afterwards. And I guess a lot of that is because their main character Ezra was hyperspaced away into the unknown regions of space. But I guess we already know that plot point is going to be continued somehow, somewhere. Yeah. But yeah, it's just, it's really difficult for them, because they've got to be really careful, because if it like, they can do it to a certain degree, but they have got to think like, why did we not see them in like any of the original trilogy? Why didn't we see them in Rogue One? Why weren't they involved in this, the other, and whatever, right? And like you said, like Andor is supposed to be set like, not, I think it's supposed to be set a bit later than this, because it's immediately after the fall of the Empire, but it's not going to be set much later than this. It's basically the same time period, and like you said, there's so much media in this time period now that they've got to be careful. I think they're lucky somewhat. The Bad Batch is the immediate part afterwards, which hasn't been covered, and like it hasn't really been covered at all until like Rebels was like somewhere halfway in between, because like Ezra had never known life without the Empire, which means it's like 10 years after this, I guess.
Yeah. Um. Yeah. It's Rebels. It does work for, as you said, but one I've always wanted to have some more like Harrison Dooley content because she was a sixth fighter pilot. I want to see some of her, but yeah, I get what you mean, and
And
maybe
they put her in Star Wars Squadrons, and that's about it.
yeah, but I need to play that game. I need to have a go at it, but I'm not sure how good. Have you played it or have
I've
you?
played a bit of it. Yeah, I've played a bit of it. It's good. I do think though Hera should be included in other material. So like, because she is out of all of them, she's the one who sticks with the rebellion and is like really entrenched in it. But we never really see that much of her in the
Hmm,
current media. It doesn't really make sense. I guess it doesn't really make sense. We don't like hear about her being in Rogue One, or we didn't actually see her in Rogue One because I think Rebels
cool,
had
yeah.
finished by then, right? It's a bit weird that she wasn't there. I don't know. Maybe she'll show up in Andor though. Although I think again we know like when the Andor show is set, it seems like it's before Rogue One, which means it's likely when the rebellion was only just like forming as a one group rather than just a bunch of groups trying to join together, like we see in Rebels, where they're all very separate to keep their identities hidden.
Yeah, no, certainly. It's yeah, we do see Hera with the ghost in um in Rogue One, as you said, and I'm pretty sure she ended up being a general. So it is quite
Mm.
confusing that she's not featured in any of the Star Wars media because she's quite a high rank, and unless they, for example, write a comic and just be like she just dies at some point, we never really get a definitive answer on that. But hopefully she'll turn up in one of the future shows. Like so,
Likely because we know she survives until after the Battle of Endor because that's talked about in the show. We know Rex does, thankfully, as
yeah,
well. Just give him a nice little life of retiring and fishing for the big bongo, right? That's all he needs. But like Hera is high ranking as Han Solo and Lando. Like she's a general, which is like it's ridiculous, like actually ridiculous. Because it
it
means that she would have been like in if she was at Battle of Endor, she likely would have been in the she would have been one of the people in that conference room where they're
briefing.
talking
Yeah,
about it. Yeah, in the briefing, she would have been there, and like the people there were like Wedge Antilles was there, or like all the big players were there. You know, Nine Nub as well, your favorite character was there, but like all of the like high ranking people were there, which means she likely. I guess I know that we don't see her in the scene, but she likely would have been in that briefing, just off screen, right?
she was
And it just
behind the
seems a bit
camera.
weird.
She
Yeah,
was
it's just
behind
behind
the
the camera.
camera.
It's just a bit weird that yeah, it's just a bit weird that we haven't seen that much more. I'm sure I need to dive into the comics and see what the comics are like, but it doesn't make sense in the media, in the like the traditional like TV and the film media, we haven't seen her used more.
To be honest, I don't think we'll get an explanation for that. I don't think we'll end up
No.
getting an explanation for why she's in it, and we'll have to assume, which is slightly frustrating because it is weird. But there isn't much they can do without having to possibly retcon or change something slightly. But it's a tricky situation. Maybe what will end up happening is going back to Bad Batch, Crosshair will just rock up, kill the whole Bad Batch, including Omega, and then they got no problems. It's all good. They're all dead, and they don't have to deal with any of the issues of them being in the rebels.
Yeah, we'll have to see what happens with it then. Although they have really set this Crosshair redemption up. We saw again, like Raka says, was it being on the lookout was Crosshair's
Yeah,
job. So again, just poor Raka just misses Crosshair.
yeah, you got to feel sorry for him. Going back to the episode where we went after that massive
That's a
tangent,
tangent.
um, the Martyr sister, yeah, they were talking about choosing sides, and then they go off with Ahsoka's droid, which was cool because it was clear like that at a point Ahsoka must have given them a droid, which and they contact someone. They are. It was a he. We have that confirmed. They were like, let's
Yeah.
contact him, And now this is the main talking point in the Star Wars fandom. Who was that person on the hologram? And just who is it?
Well, I'll go with the two ideas I had, which were it could be Ahsoka, although it doesn't make. I've seen a lot of people must think it's Ahsoka because people have been going on about the book being retconned, but that, like, when you think about it, it makes no sense anyways that she'd be involved in the rebellion that early, because all that would do is bring attention to the rebellion, and we know that she's involved later as Fulcrum, and I think Fulcrum's referred to as a he or a they a lot. So that was the possible thinking, but I don't think it'll be Ahsoka. The person I think it could be, although I'm not sure, especially as we talked earlier and you mentioned your idea, I think Rex would have been might be another candidate, since we know he's going to show up. We know he'd be interested in hearing about rogue clones, but then he doesn't have the connection with the Martinez, right? With Rafa and Trace, right? So maybe not, but I think he'd be her saying it's rogue clones would make sense, that she's telling Rex, because Rex doesn't know about the Bad Batch yet unless Cut has told them.
Yeah. No, it's my idea was Bail Organa. That was my thinking straight away, because I had a callback to the Revenge of the Sith, where this deleted scene where Bail Organa is forming the rebellion. Even then, even in the episode 3, and it would have been early stages. But I thought it could be him, but I also like the idea that it's Rex, and Ahsoka will have talked to Rex about these sisters and the experience she'd been through. And I think it being the clothing didn't give much away, which was a bit frustrating, because I was kind of looking for a bit of clues in what they were wearing, but it was more like it was like some drapes or like a cape kind of thing. But I'm not. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's between. In my opinion, it's between Bail Organa and Rex. I think I'm leaning towards Rex, having talked to you about it, and yeah, it's certainly. It'd be sick if it's someone else. That would be a cool curveball, because I at the moment can't think of anyone else it could be.
I think it again, it's like there's no one. I can't think of anyone who would care. Although I've got one character I'd like it to be, and that's behind me, and that's Hondo. Although I don't think it wouldn't be him, but again, he's another character we haven't seen enough of, and it would be nice to have another callback to the Clone Wars. But I think Rex and Bail Organa are the leading ones for me. I think I want a Bail Organa to show up in this show, but he has the least amount of reason, to be honest. Like even in Rebels, he's like, I think he's in there a few times, but even then he's sort of doing it behind the scenes because he's a senator. He doesn't want people to know he's doing this. If that makes sense. So I don't know whether even if it was Bail Organa, I'm not sure he would show his face or not, because I'm not sure I would call them trustworthy, Rafa and Trace.
Yeah.
And maybe Rex would trust them because of Ahsoka, but it could be either of them, but it's hard to tell what the connection would be with either of them as well.
You mentioned there that they're not trustworthy. Maybe they've just tricked the Bad Batch into thinking that they're going to the good guys, and really the person on the hologram is could be Darth Vader. No, or like Tarkin or someone like that, and is reporting them to the Empire. That's a potential theory. I think it's unlikely though.
I mean, the other suggestion I guess could be, right, Maul would be interesting, because I could have said about Crimson Dawn being involved somewhere, so possibly a Maul. And again, there's a clothing as well, like it's the reason why I'd like even had briefly thought, oh yeah, maybe this is why people have been going on about the Ahsoka book being retconned, or I've seen a few memes about it, because Disney retcon all the books in the comics eventually, or at least parts of them. But it's Maul would be an interesting one. I think, like you said, it'd be cool if there was a little cameo from the Crimson Dawn, or like some more of the criminal underworlds shown. It's just hard to tell what they want to do.
Yeah, I agree. I think that wraps up our discussion. What are your final thoughts on the episode, Michael?
Another good episode, unnecessary cameo.
Yeah, that's a that's a good description of the episode. And yeah, that wraps it up. Thank you for watching. As always, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. And as always, may the force be with you.